Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippie Ki Yay, motherfucker.
Die Hard, John McTiernan's 1988 action thriller film, which by some miracle absolutely none of us have seen, as we've established just before Christmas. Bruce Willis, Alan Rickman, loads of blonde-haired German dudes. Let's fire it away. Just open up the floor entirely, actually. First of all, why had none of us seen it before? I'll open that up to anybody. Anyone want to suggest why they hadn't watched it, but everyone always talks about it?
One of these films, you feel like you have seen it because you know the Yippie Ki Yay motherfucker. You know the picture of him in the in the air vents with the lighter. Like, you know it's an all-out action film. So like I've never had it on my list to watch just because you feel like you've seen it, don't you?
People talk about it so much, you feel like you have seen it and you know everything that goes on in it. But to be fair, it surprised me. In a couple of different elements of it. Has anyone else got a reason why they didn't watch it? Is it just something that they'd sort of put on their blacklist of being like a guilty pleasure that they haven't watched? They didn't want to admit to watching it.
For me, it was more like it was more of what you said, but at the same time, I think I knew what happened at the end of the film, so that never helps. I knew that the explosion. I remember seeing on TV once him hanging out the window. Hans Gruber hanging out the window and then falling. So I feel like I knew the climax of the film, so I never had like a proper urge to watch it for that reason.
Mm.
I didn't know anything about it at all, so I was properly coming into this like a fresh movie. Other than Yippie Ki Yay, motherfucker, that was like the only thing that I was like, this is from that. I don't know why, it just slipped my radar. I think it's because my nan really likes it, and she likes. Like, her favourite films like Dirty Dancing and... Actually, she likes Dances with Wolves, which is why we couldn't watch it the other week. But I think just because she watched it, I didn't trust her. But actually, come to think of it, her other favourite film is LA Confidential, and that's a bloody good movie.
She likes some decent movies, your grandma.
Slipped my... just slipped my knowledge, to be honest. Yeah. I think I've watched one of the later ones. I think I've watched like 45 minutes of Die Hard 2. or 3, there's loads, isn't there?
Just seen the sequels instead. I think it's just one of those ones that sort of, if I was ever just going to watch a film, I've never just been like, oh yeah, Die Hard, I'll go for that one. Like, even if it was on a server that was easy to access or anything like that, I've just never done that, let alone even at Christmas. And we all know the joke that it's a Christmas film, but it's never crossed my mind to really watch it at Christmas. What were people's first thoughts about it? Obviously, it's Bruce Willis. It was actually one of Bruce Willis's more early breakthrough roles. Actually, put him down as more of an action/comedy actor. He hadn't really done comedy before like that. And his character, John's I found his character quite entertaining and sort of one that I quite liked. James, what did you think?
If I'm being completely honest, I can't remember the film very well. It was so long ago that I watched it. But from what I can remember, I don't remember enjoying it that much. I don't remember enjoying it that much at all. I quite liked Bruce Willis's character in it. I despised Hans Gruber. I just didn't. It's not that you go into it and you go, oh, I really don't like that villain, and you go, well, it's because the villain's playing a good role. I didn't like the villain because I didn't find him very intimidating. I couldn't take him very seriously at times.
He's German, mate.
Yeah, I quite liked. I thought actually Bruce Willis's character, he did play the kind of comedic action hero at times, as you were saying. I think there was times where I was laughing at his little like mutterings to himself, and when he was talking to himself in the moment, kind of trying to G himself up, like those things like that, I quite thought they were well placed. Yeah. But I think as an overall film, I didn't really rate it at all. I take that I'm completely on my own with that one then.
There's a lot of stunned faces here.
Yeah.
From my side, yeah, you are. I really enjoyed it. You're right. It kind of straddles. I couldn't tell at one point if it was like one of those aeroplane movies, where they're like the over the top comedies and they're like taking the mickey out of other films of that ilk, Like, I didn't know whether it was almost like a parody or an action, but I quite like the fact that it straddled comedy and being quite over the top. And like the sequences are pretty good. For what is it 1980s, early 90s? But
late 80s.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with it. It must have been pretty high budget. And Bruce Willis is just a good actor. Like he could carry it pretty well. And yeah, it was like an easy watch as well. The characters are quite laid out quite obviously for you as to who you're meant to like and who you're meant to hate. The good cop, the bad cop, the FBI, etc. But there was one point where I was like, okay, this is on the edge of a parody. It was on the FBI guys, where in the helicopter, and all of a sudden he's a Nam veteran and turns his hat backwards and gets out a sniper. I was like, this is like very like Rambo True Blood, like the third one where he's in Vietnam, and it's like they take the mick out of it in Tropic Thunder because of him racking up so many kills with like one guy. It was kind of like that. But I mean, I enjoy those. I've watched all of the Rambos back to back, so it hit a good sweet spot for me.
Gob just loves a classic 80s action film, basically.
They're great.
I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I thought Die Hard. I thought this was good fun. It was cheesy at moments, but not to say I didn't enjoy it. And I think it's very much a true action film. It's a script that's quite straightforward, a story that's straightforward. But like you say, Tom, it's an easy watch, and if you're in for an action thriller like that, which is going to have a few laughs and some explosions, then I think Die Hard did a pretty solid job at it for a film that it was 32 years ago it was released. So that we've got so much modern cinema to compare it to. But for a 1988 thriller, which has loads of explosives in a skyscraper and all that, I think it seems pretty good. There's no CGI in there really.
I was going to say, I think that's quite a key point, because quite often when you have a film that's that old, if they had gone CGI route, it would just completely be dated by now. Yeah. But instead they did a lot of stunts, a lot of practical effects that actually it still holds up pretty well. Yeah,
with the in awards, it was nominated for 5 Oscars. So and some of them were best. Sorry, is it 3 Oscars? It might be. Oh no! So best effects, visual effects, sound effects, editing, film editing, and best sound. So all those, they're all kind of designs that they put a lot of effort into. And actually, now there's so many cheat codes to those treatments on films, especially visual effects.
I definitely noticed the editing. I thought the editing was sick, so I'm glad it got an Oscar nod in that department. I just liked the way, I thought everything about the film I kind of expected. I knew I was just going to get a good bit of cheese, like a good wholesome action film from '88, because most films are based on Die Hard since then, really. But what I didn't think I would get was just like really good cinematography and really good editing. So I got that out of the film more than what I expected. I thought the film grain was just paying. I like watching films which have that kind of like gritty, classic kind of LA look to them, especially the first like 10, 15 minutes of the film where they're shooting like some of the sunsets in LA and the plane coming in and all that stuff. That was just kind of like, even though I hadn't watched the film before, it just felt classic, felt very nostalgic. And I also liked how the camera kept pointing. It kept the way that it racked focus and the way that it moved around the sets. It kept pointing your eye to where it wanted you to focus your attention. And I thought it was just kind of clever in the way that it was constructed.
What about the characters and the dialogue? Then I know you say the Hans Gruber, James, you're not a huge fan. I mean the Germans, all these blonde Germans, and their dialogue was very cliche, very cheesy, but I think unashamedly so. I mean, it's just seriously, no one could be sat there writing those lines being like, this is like A-class dialogue here that I'm writing. But yeah, the characters as a whole, what did you think of the broad range of them, even down to the the work colleague who does drugs and just tries to actually talk to the terrorists and stuff like that? Do you think, just as a whole, the characters, there were enough characters, or were they not treated well?
Yeah, I think they all played their part, and as you said, it's an action film. It'd be easy to overanalyze it, but in the day, it was enjoyable. Each of the characters played their role well. It wasn't anyone. So Rob, as you've identified. Gruber, the main villain that you didn't like, but I didn't think anyone stood out as sort of not acting well or unnecessary. I quite like the driver who sat in the limo. I really enjoyed the scene at the start. It set it quite nicely when you see all the snow coming down and they start playing like Christmas hip hop music. I was like, okay, quite enjoyed that. Yeah. I thought there was a few little roles, like I thought the guy on the radio would have more of a role, and then right at the end he whips out the pistol and it's great, and they do get a bit more involved. I think overall it is an action film. It's a classic, and it does that very well. I had watched it on Christmas Day with a couple of pints of Rebellion, and would recommend it.